This week we tackle the Nullarbor Drive, so we stuck up in Ceduna before we start, as supplies are expensive and limited along this 1,200 kilometre road. First we visited the drive-through bottle shop and started the journey with all the essentials. We headed off and drove past Pink Lake, Cactus Beach, lacking cacti, and ended the day shortly after in a camp to rest, ready for more driving the next day.
First stop was the city of windmills. The next morning we hit the first roadhouse on the journey in Penong, home of the largest windmill in Australia, Comet. It was also the home of our first hole on the Nullarbor Golf, which stretches across the entire Nullarbor. First hits were dubious at best and awful at worst, but we did eventually introduce ball to hole before stopping to pat a large wombat, then onwards to a walk on the pier in Fowler's Bay, followed by another drive to eat lunch at the imaginatively named Mexican Hat. After lunch, we decided to stretch the legs in search of some of Australia's sea lions. We did eventually find a small colony of sea lions hanging out in a sheltered cove, out of reach from the rather formidable Southern Ocean. On the way back, we came across some escapee sheep and with no signal turned to more traditional methods to find our way back to the main road west. Next, another roadhouse, which can only mean more big swings, lost balls, and some successes before sitting back in the car where we soon hit the eastern edge of the treeless plain. Not really much to add here, lots of shrubbery, no trees, not really much of anything to be honest, but it did result in a pretty unique sunset as it dips over the incredibly flat horizon.
We started the day at Nullarbor Roadhouse at the Dingo Hole for a quick game of golf where we almost lost a ball to an eagle-eyed crow. After a nail-biter of a game, we drive past more treeless plain. Stopped at the Bunder Cliffs for stunning views where between May and August you can often find whales migrating. Back on the road we were reunited with trees. We made a stop at the old roadhouse, Cunalda Homestead, where there was a small car graveyard and you could go inside the homestead as well, which was very interesting. Nearby was a blowhole which supplied us with some very welcome cold air on a hot day and at a force neither of us expected. After a bit of exploring, we were in need of lunch, so stopped by more Bunder Cliffs for more dramatic views of cliffs and crashing waves. We found a camp near the cliffs, which was a stunning spot, and had celebratory ciders. We had tacos with a view, and were rewarded with another amazing sunset, although the camera never quite does do it justice.
We woke up early for a big day of golf, but before we could get going, we came across a pair of dingoes running around the campground entrance. As they head off into the bush, we head off to our first hole, which set the tempo, and it went swing, swing, drive, swing, swing, drive, swing, swing, drive. My lightning review of our game was that there were some big hits, some small hits, some tiny hits, some painfully close hits, some unorthodox hits, some misdirected hits, some non-hits, some we would rather forget altogether, and some that we'll never forget. And some that really just kept us believing that anything was possible. Other highlights of the day included seeing an impressive 54-wheeler land train, almost running out of fuel in the middle of nowhere, seeing a large kangaroo with a jar of Vegemite, a large whale, and Australia's longest straight road, which is where we called it a day with another sunset.
Today we took on the longest straight road in Australia. We take more swings and sink more balls at the Skylab hole, and then continue on the straight road until we get a reminder of what Bend looks like. Pingu hit 290,000 kilometres, marking 10,000 kilometres travelled so far, and we get signal for the first time in 4 days as we hit Norseman. We mark the end of the Nullarbor with a final hot round of golf at Norseman to close out our golfing stint, and it's anyone's guess as to who won. We enjoyed the celebratory Bundaberg at the servo, cracked open a soy sauce with lunch, and drove to the local free public pool. As if this wasn't amazing enough, they handed out complimentary watermelon. After a big day, we ended in a free camp, saw wild horses, and the sunset rounded out the day. The Nullarbor, complete it, mate.